Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here today with Rob Henderson. Rob, how are you doing?
Hey, good, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing great. So we are here to talk about Blackbird, which is a TV what do they call those things? It's like a limited series. So they had 6 episodes of this thing. It's not a what do they call those
I
things?
think it's a mini series would probably
Miniseries.
be
That's the
right.
word. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. So it's a
Yeah.
six episode miniseries. I didn't know it was a miniseries. I got to episode 5. And I'm like, oh, this is wrapping up pretty quickly. I thought it was going to be a full season and then continue. And then you told me, like, no, that this is a miniseries, so it's going to end.
Yeah. Well, it's funny.
So
You sent me the documentary for this. I don't know. I think it was like early 2010s or something when they did the documentary, and there they said that it was going to be made into a movie, like the story because it's based on real events. So I guess
yeah,
they didn't make the story into a movie, so I guess they stuck with the miniseries. But
did you
yeah, I
look
don't
up
think
if
they
they
could
made
have.
it into a movie?
I didn't actually look it up. I just listened to the documentary and then just assumed that they made it into this miniseries instead. Um,
Uh,
I don't
Jimmy
know if it could
Keene.
have worked. I guess they could have. This is actually a pretty straightforward story, and it probably could have worked as a movie. And in fact, maybe it would have. In some ways, I could imagine it would have been better because you and I know now because you and I have both read about the actual events of what happened in this the story of Blackbird. Yeah, a lot of it was it's kind of superfluous. They introduced some elements outside of what really happened. I think maybe in part to extend it longer to make it more interesting or something. But anyway,
They added diversity. So we talked about this. So it's
okay,
really
that did.
funny.
Okay.
So there was a so the prosecutor apparently was white. They made him black
The real
for
prosecutor Beaumont
yeah.
was an older
They
white
changed his
man.
first. They changed his first name to some. His first
Oh,
name
they
was something
did.
else.
Oh,
Yeah,
they changed the name. Interesting.
just the
Uh,
first name. He's still Beaumont. He was Beaumont in real life.
hmm.
But yeah, he's a white guy. So they needed color. They apparently thought, and then they made an FBI. When I was started watching this, I'm like, who's this really hot FBI agent? She happens to be there when they're raiding him. They're raiding Jimmy at the beginning, and then she's there, like still dealing with him. Trying to get him to go narc on Larry Hall. And I'm like, oh, can't be a real person, and it's not a real person. There's no FBI agent that hot. They say she's a amalgamation of different FBI agents, but I saw another site that says she was actually based on a woman in the FBI who's not pretty, and who wasn't really involved, who wasn't actually at the raid, and who had nothing to do with the Larry Hall thing. So she's just a woman who worked in the FBI like around the same time, and I guess it was just
Well,
based on her.
Richard, just be grateful they made her hot.
I
Uh,
am grateful. I am
well,
grateful of that. Yeah.
well, did you? I mean, they do this sometimes. There was. Did you see Chernobyl, the HBO miniseries about
I
the
watched some of it. I
nuclear?
thought it was boring, and then I stopped. Yeah. So who?
Oh,
Oh no, they
what?
did.
That was a good series, but there was a woman scientist, this female Russian scientist who was like, I don't know, forecasting or trying to explain to everyone what was going to happen. And I read about the miniseries later, and I was like, no, there was no like female Russian scientist who was like trying to explain to the authorities that there was going to be a meltdown or something. So they sometimes they add people, they change people around, make it more. I thought that was like there was almost like an interesting a way to appeal to both sides of the divide here. They made the prosecutor black, but then they invented this really hot FBI agent. So, it's like a little bit of something for everyone,
Well, they
make
gave they
make
gave, well, they gave us identity politics both way, but I guess you're saying people who
well,
don't like identity politics want to see hot women, and I
well, I
guess
told you, right. I told you that there's that saying I think Stephen Colbert popularized back in the day of reality has a well-known liberal bias.
uh-huh.
And yet, when real stories are converted into fiction, they actually take reality and, introduce certain biases in that aren't actually reflected in reality. So I find
Yeah.
that
So
to be amusing.
here's why they changed the prosecutor's name. In the show, the black guy is named Edmund Beaumont, but the real one is named Lawrence Beaumont, which means his name would have been Larry, which I think would have like confused would have
Yeah.
been confusing or distracting or something
Well,
maybe.
would it have? I mean, I think they
Probably
referred to
not.
him as Beaumont the whole time
Yeah,
too.
yeah. I didn't
So
even remember his name.
yeah.
Or here's another funny thing: the male cop. in this show was named Gary Miller. He's real, but in real life, he's really fat. And so they made him. They made
Is
him
he the one with
so
the sunglasses in the documentary? I
the
mean, I don't
one
know if
with
you
the
watched the
sun.
documentary.
I
This
did
is
watch
guy
a documentary, but
was he like the big dude with the sunglasses and I don't know, or was he a private
yeah,
investigator?
that was him. That was him.
That was him. He was like a big dude with a big chin. He's wearing these,
Yeah, yeah.
the
Well,
sort
they
of
well
like
they
boomer shades.
well in the
Uh,
documentary they showed the scene that was actually in the show where he's walking through that cornfield. Don't you remember that scene? So that's how I knew it was him.
oh, interesting. Okay, yeah. Well, and he was, in the show, right, the fictional version of Miller. He was like, he's an older guy, but he was also like quite attractive, and I don't know. In
Yeah.
many ways, like I enjoyed this show just because it seemed like such a. I mean, just what what's the word I'm looking for? But just kind of a throwback to like before all of the political correct stuff took over, where you just have like everyone on TV is hotter. We just
Yeah.
accept that, right? Like actors are hotter than real life, so they chose everyone. Like even so the main guy, right? Maybe we should just like actually explain the plot a little bit. Jimmy
Uh,
Keene, the protagonist, you see him in real life, like he's still like relatively young in real life and whatever. But then you see, he's not bad looking. He's like a slightly above average looking guy probably. But then they picked like a super good looking dude to play him. I forgot the actor's name. He's actually a British guy who plays him. Um,
Taron Egerton.
Egerton or something, yeah. But he's like, he's got like the most chiseled jaw. You could tell that he got jacked for this role, right? Like he's shredded. He's just like good hair, everything, right? Like they picked a really good looking guy to play him, so appeals
No,
to
but the real Jimmy Keene is
to.
shredded too. There was
Oh, is
photos in the
it?
documentary.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, who's an athlete, right? So, but yeah, they
Yeah.
picked a better looking version of him to play him, which is what what happens when you make these dramatizations. So he's based on a real story, right? So he's a drug dealer. Does he sell guns too? I think they mentioned that in the show.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't think
and the
so.
FBI raids his house and arrests him, and he gets sentenced to 10 years, which is pretty wild, right? But I guess he'd been trafficking in narcotics for a long time. I
Well,
don't know. Was that his first arrest?
the documentary said he was making in like he was raking in like $1 million a year or something like that. So he was not a
Yeah,
small drug dealer.
yeah. He was. Yeah. He was pretty high up. And so 10 years, but then the FBI, or is it the FBI, right? They approach him to make a deal. They make a deal saying, if you enter this, maximum security prison, and try to get, well, I guess the deal was try to get this guy, this guy we suspect is a serial killer, to confess and say where the bodies are buried, because I guess they don't know, they don't have any hard evidence to lock this guy away, and he's up for appeal. So they tell this guy, we want you to befriend him. And the whole plot, like even as I'm explaining it, it sounds crazy that this actually happened. They just like grab this drug dealer, like, hey, can you get this guy to confess? Tell us where the bodies are, and then we'll commute your sentence.
Why
And
not?
that's what
Why is
they
that?
do.
It doesn't strike me as that crazy.
Why
I mean, these
would
people
like
are.
why would they choose him? Like, was he the? Well, I guess like I have a few questions, right? Because in
Who
the
else did
show
they
they make it
go?
seem like they interviewed a bunch of people, right? Like, what's the woman's name? The female FBI agent, Lauren McCauley. So she, in the first episode or the second, early in the series, she's like interviewing Jimmy, and she's like, well, we have other people who are up for this role who we could also commute their sentences, and we could also use them. And I think she makes up some other application of some guy who's also an impressive and interesting person who could also be an informant for them. um yeah, just seems like pretty unreal that they would trust another convict who, like
Why
why would they
not?
trust him to do this?
Don't they use convicts as sources all the time to get info from? This happens all the time.
Does
They
it?
have them testify in court against one another.
Mm, sure, to testify, but not like this sort of long game,
I think they
gradual
do. I think.
process. Do
Well,
they?
they do. I mean, don't they? It's not like random. It's like they'll tell them like go talk to. I'm sure they tell them like go talk to this guy and try to see what he knows. I mean, I'm sure that it seems like a good.
Yeah,
Seems like a
that
good.
that that like maybe like a one-on-one interaction or something. But they wanted him to befriend this guy, uh, build confidence and trust with him. Um,
That's what you would do.
yeah,
That's what you would
I
do.
mean,
I mean, if you were trying to get someone to say something.
is that? well, I mean, I guess like part of the reason why it was made into a series in the first place is because of sort of how novel, how peculiar the whole situation was. But yeah, so they get him to do this, right? They have him enter the prison, and yeah, I thought it was well done. Like I don't know how much of the early scenes were based in reality of how he was able to befriend Larry and his uncertainty around it. And yeah, what did you think of that? Did you think that that was what, like how well done do you think that was of him trying
Well,
to build a
let
relationship?
me just say a few more things about the aesthetics and like who looks like what and all these other things. So, the brother of Larry, before we move on,
All
so it's
right.
not going to mean anything to people who haven't watched the show,
Larry's
but
the serial killer, for just to be clear. So Larry
yeah,
Hall, the serial
but
killer.
watch, watch it. No spoilers. Go watch it
Yeah.
and, before you listen to us. It's only 6 episodes. But the So Gary, Larry's brother, is much better looking in the show than in real life.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
he is he's like, they make him out to be like a big, tall, sort of strapping guy in the show. He's not really that. He's just like better than Larry, I guess. Larry,
Mm.
interestingly enough, looks very much like the actor. I mean, they did not. The real guy is straight out of Central Casting. Um, what's with the mutton chops and the just being fat and he's got that
The
look.
Burnsides.
Yeah, the burn sides, not the sideburns. Yes, and he is his voice. They changed his voice. Now in the show, his voice is like, "Oh, hello, Jimmy. Yes, I was
It's
following
like
those
high
girls."
pitched,
Exactly. So in the
creepy.
documentary, they play a tape from like his confession or him recanting, and he sounds like a normal guy with a southern accent. So that is interesting. That voice that they used in the show was really, I mean, it was really it contributed to everything because you're listening to this guy and he just seems so creepy and so weird, and it's the voice. If he just sounds normal, the effect is completely different.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think he still would have been creepy. The voice added something to it, but I thought the actor did well with the role because even his movements, the way that he walked, the way that he held his hands, his facial
Yeah,
expressions, everything about it was like, very. I mean, if you ever watch like videos of Charles Manson in court or some of these other serial killers, yeah, they're just like there's something off about the way that they communicate, the way that their gestures, the ways that their eyes and eyebrows move. There's always something just a little off about them. And I think it was heightened. It was magnified for effect for the show. But yeah, just the way that he walked, something just
Ugh.
felt off about it. I
Well,
mean,
I
I actually
think
think they picked a guy who was like less attractive than the actual Larry Hall. I mean, not that the real Larry Hall was a good-looking guy, but they actually made the actor even more sort of unpleasant, like more he was
yeah.
heavier. I think his facial hair was a little bit more unkempt. He looked actually a little bit worse, but his twin brother, they picked like a very good looking, yeah, strapping guy,
Yeah,
but
they
in
wanted
real
to
life,
tell a part of
yeah.
the story. They wanted to tell part of the story that one of the twins sucked all the nutrients from the others, and that's sort of the idea. And that was based in something real. I think Gary or Larry, or Gary might have said it.
Well, in the documentary, Gary, the non-serial killer twin, he said something along the lines of like, yeah, I was always like the more popular and outgoing twin. I had an easier time making friends. But he was clearly like, just a regular guy who spoke a little, his speech patterns were a little bit off. Something was weird about him too, but he just
So
did not
Manson
inherit
and
the
Larry Hall
serial
are
killer
completely. Well, I don't know. I
propensity.
haven't seen any videos of the real Larry Hall, but Manson would be a different guy because Manson was charismatic and got women to follow him, while Larry Hall repulsed everybody. Like everyone didn't want to be
Yeah,
around him.
yeah,
So
yeah, that's true.
these yeah. So they're both going to be weird probably, but it's
Yeah, weird in different ways or has a different effect on people. Yeah, that's true. And I also wonder, like, I mean, the videos I saw of Manson, they might have been edited, but yeah, like I think the actor probably studied some of these and exaggerated them for the series.
yeah. You
Um,
know, yeah.
yeah,
So one thing about the Larry Hall is there's like a some psychiatrist or something wrote up just like a timeline of his life, and one of the things is like he had a low IQ and was picked on, and I don't know if the real Larry Hall or the Larry Hall in this show has a low IQ. I don't think so. I mean, he's reading books on Civil War, on the Civil War. He's able to cover up his crimes. Even the real
Hmm.
Larry Hall, if it's true what they say that he killed all these women and got away with it for a very long time, and his hobby was the Civil War, it doesn't seem like he would be a low IQ guy either. So I was trying to look up if there's any like where that comes from, that idea that he was low IQ, and yeah, I don't
I
see
mean,
any.
I wonder if like it's not that hard to like take an IQ test and perform poorly on it if you know that performing poorly will be to your advantage, right?
They say they say when he was a kid. They say when he was a kid he was like diagnosed with low IQ.
Yeah, okay, maybe. I mean, yeah, like at least the way that he was portrayed in the show, yeah, he seemed relatively adept, right? Like even the way that he signed, like there was a scene in the first episode where they get him to confess initially, right? The police get him to confess and they have him sign a form and he signs it in like all caps in just sort of standard print English, Larry, like Larry. That's all he writes. And then later in court, they describe how he actually knows how to sign his actual signature. So the fact that he just wrote Larry on the confession form meant that he knew that he was being coerced into giving this confession. And so he intentionally didn't sign it properly, something along those lines. I mean, perhaps indicating that he was, he wanted to have an avenue out of that confession, and somehow it worked, right? Because then later, I think that was used for his appeal. So, yeah, I don't think he was a dumb guy, but I mean, he wasn't that smart either, right? Like for a
Yeah.
serial killer, he's just sort of like probably average,
Well, I
maybe
mean, he got
slightly
away
above
with
average.
if he got away with all these murders and they never got caught. He seems like he sort of had to be smart. So they're saying that this. So there was an FBI agent who went to visit him to get information to Jimmy in prison, apparently in real life, to get information from him. And it says here she kissed him like to maintain his cover,
Okay.
like visiting him when he was in down in Missouri. Keene's That's from Keene's memoir. So I want to actually want to read the memoir. We should read the book. So Keene wrote a book with some guy. So Keene now is, by the way, like a business guy who like consults law enforcement or whatever. This is such a, I don't know if he actually knows anything, but it's a good work, I guess. Uh, okay, so yeah, let's get into the actual show. So yes, did I think it was the way he befriended him, was that well done? I mean, I think I mean, I didn't think it was absurd. There was nothing there when I was like, oh, come on. I think there needed to be maybe more. Yeah, I do think that Jimmy was a little bit too eager. There needed to be he needed to like it was like he's trying to win Larry's approval of him. I like the fact that it was a there was a that was based on apparently on a real event. So in the show,
Yeah.
somebody changes the channel that Larry and other people are watching. Jimmy beats him up in the show. That apparently happened in real life. He
Yeah,
fought
they're
some
in the
guy.
TV room, right? The TV room of the prison. He's actually watching something about serial killers.
It's
Oh,
America's Most
America's
Wanted.
Most Wanted,
Yeah,
right. And then some other inmate gets up, changes the channel. Jimmy, he sees an opportunity, I think, to bond with
yeah,
Larry by defending him and saying, "Hey,
yeah,
change that back," and then punches the guy.
yeah.
And yeah, at least according to the documentary, that was a real event that occurred, and
But
that helped to bring them
why
closer.
doesn't Larry get, maybe Larry is low IQ and this is why he doesn't get it. Why is Larry not suspicious that this really cool guy is so desperate to be like nobody else? Like it doesn't seem like I think the one thing the show doesn't do well or doesn't do at all, and maybe this is realistic. It doesn't show any kind of like politics of the prison. It's not like nobody's like, hey, why is that guy talking to that guy? Like what do they have in common? Like I'm confused. Larry is like a child rapist and killer. I thought those guys had very bad times in jail, but he's in this maximum security prison and he's like having lunch with his buddies and he's sort of popular and respected. I don't. Yeah, I wish I knew more about that, or maybe that
That
stuff
is
about.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so you're saying maybe the common knowledge about how child molesters are treated very poorly, maybe it's untrue. Yeah, that was interesting. They never got into that. Another thing that Larry never really brought up with Jimmy, at least that I can recall, is he never asked Jimmy why he was in, right? Like I
oh,
don't think
I think.
Jimmy revealed, like, because they were in a maximum security prison, and so it would be odd for a narcotics trafficker, nonviolent crime, to be there, unless Jimmy made something up. I don't know exactly.
No, I think it was.
Um,
I remember the Larry Jimmy had a story in prison. He
oh,
was
did
a gun.
he?
Oh, I think that was it. He was a gun runner, and I don't know if maybe that's worse than.
Oh,
He
right.
said that, and maybe I don't know if he said he was a drug dealer too, but he was a gun runner, and so that was the idea. And I don't know. I don't know if Larry's too knowledgeable about who gets put in. It depends on behavior too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if like he had behaved badly in his previous prison, he
Isn't
would
that
be
unbelievable
transferred.
that he would, well, maybe like his experiences growing up or whatever. I mean, if it's true what his brother said about him being unpopular, but I've seen some research on this about how like prison inmates actually tend to have like relatively high self-esteem and tend to score higher on narcissism than average and all these kinds of things. Like they tend, the prisoners are like lower IQ than average, but in terms of their sort of self-image and self-enhancement, like they actually seem to like think pretty highly of themselves.
Yeah, I don't
um
think that show doesn't say they don't, right? It doesn't have them
yeah.
acting
And Larry,
like
like, I
fuckers.
mean, maybe what you're saying is true that like Larry like killed 15 plus people, buried them, never got caught. And he's like, yeah, I'm kind of a badass, so like naturally, people want to be friends with me. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what's going on there, but I don't find it super unbelievable. I guess Jimmy kind of was concerned, right? Because or was it Jimmy or was it Lauren McCauley, the FBI agent? So one of them made this, like she said something like, "How are you going to be friends with him?" And he did say something like, "Maybe he'll want to be friends with a cool guy." Something like that. Like, so he has this sort of image of himself as being cool. The judge later on calls him entitled, and so he has this kind of self confidence that maybe Larry, at least overtly, doesn't have.
Yeah,
But yeah, I guess like he was new too. I don't know how long had Larry been in there when Jimmy first entered, but Jimmy was also kind of a new guy, and sometimes there's a new person, and even if they have some kind of like popularity or status or cachet, if they're new, other people can win them over, other groups, and so on. And I mean, you see this often happen in like schools or other social settings where like someone who's really good looking or really talented enters and they join like a mid tier or low ranking social group, and then over time they actually exit, right? Like once they realize like, oh, I can join a higher status group, they
yeah,
they, they tend to leave. But in this prison situation, Jimmy's whole mission was to befriend Larry and never leave him. And I think
yeah,
in a real prison setting, maybe Larry would have tried to befriend him, maybe they would have become friends, but then Jimmy would have eventually started hanging out more with the mob boss,
yeah.
what's that guy's name, Chin, Vincent the Chin Gigante, and
Uh-huh.
spent less time with Larry, something like that. But yeah, I guess yeah, it's plausible that it happened the way it did.
Yeah, yeah. And the mob guy was real, and that was also real. They became friends, I guess. Um, the Yeah, I mean, so you would think Larry is a reject, and he knows. I mean, he has a lifetime of rejection, so I think he knows no one likes him. He always complains about this with girls. He also at some point asks Jimmy like, "Oh, why do you want to be friends with me?" He does like ask him. He is insecure that like this guy wants to be friends with him. Now, Lauren gave him good advice, which is like you can't hide that you're cool, so just like be Gary, basically. And I think
Hmm.
he did that. Gary's the older twin older twin. I don't know if he's older, but they're twins, and they're always he's always been looking
Looking
out for
out for
Larry.
him. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, beating up that guy is like looking out for him. But yeah, I think there could have been more subtlety in the relationship, and there could have been more as far as like what are the why aren't people like Jimmy? Why are you spending all your time with this weird, creepy, child rapist? Like,
Yeah.
hey, the mob guy might want to bring it up to him.
That's
It's like,
that's interesting, right? The mob guy, the Chid, Vincent the Chid. He never says like, why are you friend? Because yeah, early on, so basically, like shortly after Jimmy enters the maximum security prison, he meets with this mob guy. This is actually a real story, right? Like this mob boss in New York, he would actually like walk around. I can't remember. It wasn't Little Italy, but somewhere, and he would like yell at himself, like he would pretend to be crazy on purpose to throw the FBI off his trail. And then eventually they locked him up and they put him in this prison. And so he meets with Jimmy and they get along. Jimmy tells him he's like, three-quarters Italian on his mom's side and partly on his dad. His dad's played by Ray Liotta, which I think is pretty cool. That was I think that might have been his final role, Ray Liotta,
yeah,
before he died. Um, and so, yeah, he takes a liking to him and kind of like helps to look out for him. They play the ball game together. But yeah, he never brings up like, why is this guy your friend? Like, clearly you can do better than this. Like, come hang out with us more.
Yeah.
It doesn't do that. So that was odd.
And there aren't anyone
Yeah.
else. There's no one else in the jail he has interaction. It's like his cell is like diagonal from Larry's, but it doesn't. You never see anyone else in like any of the other cells, or like between there should be cells between them, right? And they're like, they're talking and they're friends, and it doesn't seem that strict actually for a maximum security prison. I don't know what prison is like, but they're walking in and out of each other's cells. Like, I don't know if that's like supposed to be what maximum security prisons are like. I would have thought they would have been a little bit tougher. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I have I have one friend who was in San Quentin in California, and
uh,
he said it's not a, well, like other TV shows depict prison as like this crazy, like rigid hellhole, and he says it's not quite that intense. I think San Quentin is like a medium security prison,
mm,
and so I think like yeah, I don't know. I think it's possible that maybe it's actually not as bad as you might think, but
yeah.
this did seem
Well,
particularly permissive.
yeah.
In that they left
Well,
them alone, unsupervised. That seemed unbelievable to me. They left them in this garage without any supervision. I
yeah.
could imagine them like leaving the cells open during the day and being able to
Mhm.
move around, but
Well, federal
otherwise, yeah.
prisons I've heard are better. I mean, are better than state prisons because you don't get the common crazy criminals. You get like the mob guys and the people who've sort of a little bit less physically dangerous. So you have something like Larry Hall, who's not physically dangerous to other inmates. You have the mob guy. Other people that you have to sort of be a big deal to become a federal criminal. It's not just anyone who does anything. And it seems like they put them in maximum security. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're that dangerous. Often they're like political. Like I think like people who get arrested, like like Warren Jeffs, the fundamentalist LDS guy. I think people like that are just put in maximum security prisons in the federal system. Okay, so yeah, but it was still a little bit more than I would have. It's a lot more lenient than I would have expected. I mean, I guess Larry has this advantage because he's good at fixing stuff, which is another sign of not necessarily being, mentally deficient. I mean, he's apparently good with his hands and good at fixing stuff.
One
um,
thing that was interesting is that, like, now that we're getting into this about some of the oversights of the show, is they inserted a subplot that didn't happen in real life, and I wondered
yeah,
if the show would have been somehow better served if they had gotten more into like the prison politics or
yeah,
some of the other friendships or something. But yeah, I mean, so shortly after Jimmy arrives, his dad, Big Jim, right, played by Ray Liotta, shows up, and they meet, and then his dad like lets slip that he used to be a police officer, right? So Jimmy's dad he's an ex-cop, and one of the security guards in the prison overhears it and uses this as blackmail against Jimmy, and he says like, so you're a cop's son, and somehow he learns that Jimmy's a snitch for the FBI, right? That he's trying to get information from another convict, and so the security guard blackmails him and says, I want you to give me $10,000, or I'm going to like basically tell the mob guy and everyone else in the prison that you're a snitch. And it was a weird subplot because it kind of fizzles out, right? Like nothing actually happens with this, right? Nothing. It goes absolutely nowhere. Um, where Jimmy attempts to get the money, he doesn't have the money, right? So then he has his dad like, try to like locate a brick of cocaine. They can't find it. He just tells the security guard, "Hey, I can't get the money. I can't get the drugs. I can't help you. I can't do anything." And then for the rest of the show, it's kind of like hanging over him, where the security
yeah.
guard's like, "Hey, I could fuck you at any minute," but he never does. And I guess like the final scene of the show, or the final whatever the conclusion of this subplot is, that I guess we're meant to believe that the security guard does tell the mob guy and his underlings that Jimmy's a snitch. And there's that scene where they like come to his cell and like, is very menacing, tells him a story. And then the other guy, like, he does this or something, he makes this gesture, cutting his throat or something. And then that was it. It was like very
Well, didn't
useless,
they get
the 6 episodes.
the correctional officer Carter? He tells him like, "Oh,
Yeah,
you're here to
Carter.
get Larry. Some things are bigger than this stuff." So he's a child rapist. So like, he basically got his blessing, and then I don't know if that's supposed to be how it ended. He's like, he found out it was Larry, so they said it's okay. And then like, Jimmy has the power. Jimmy finds out that this guy is full of it because I think what happened in the show was supposed. I think the plot was supposed to be like Carter tried to get them to go after him, but they knew somehow that it was, that he was going after Larry. So maybe this is why
Uh,
he's a child molester, so they dislike Larry, so they think it's okay. But then Carter just, because of that, says, "Oh, don't worry about it." And then Jimmy knows that Carter is sort of full of it and says, "I don't think you have control over these guys anyway." So like Carter maybe wanted them to go after Jimmy, but then it's all made up. I mean, none of this
yeah,
happened.
this none of this really happened, but I like that. I like that interpretation of what happened, where maybe the security guard, but then the mob guy was uh, savvy enough to understand, right, that like, oh, that's why Jimmy's spending so much time with this freak, is
Yeah,
because he's trying to extract information to get him to not be released. And
yeah,
he, what his dislike, his dislike of Larry outweighs his dislike of snitches, and that's
yeah,
why he decides not to act on this information and kill Jimmy. That's, yeah, I like that. That's like a neat sort of a resolution to that subplot. But
yeah,
I still think that it was a little bit of a waste. I mean, that didn't happen. They could have done something else with it. They could have gotten more into the relationship. I mean, they had 6 episodes. They explored, they went into Larry's background, him and his brother. I mean, yeah, I thought that was funny. That like when you sent me the documentary, I watched it. I was like, "That's his brother." Like, like I don't know.
yeah.
In the show, like they have this like really good looking guy, and he's just like he's basically Larry without the mutton chops. That's what
Yeah.
he is.
Exactly.
Uh, and then they get into to James, right? Like, or Jimmy. They get into his background. They do a little bit of an
Let me
excavation of
finish.
his life.
Let me
Yeah,
finish on this thing. So that story wraps everything up, except like why at the beginning they never like cared that he hung out with Larry. Maybe they figured it out from the start or something. I don't know how they would do that, but I'm sure it's probably in there. If you probably there's a book. Jimmy wrote a book with somebody, and so it's probably in there. Like it explains why they're not going after him as a, because it may be what happened in real life. I'm just speculating. This could be in the book. I don't know. But like, the mob guy figures it out and says, or he tells the mob guy or something. He wouldn't admit this in the book, and then he figures it out, and so that becomes like, a reason that nobody thinks it's weird that he's hanging out with Larry all the whole time. That still needs an explanation of like why before, and maybe they did this in the show because they needed to make it like more dramatic. They needed to have
yeah.
like a reason, something that makes sense. It can't just be like, the mob guy figured it out on his own. Maybe that it could work, and then like told him like, don't worry about it. Maybe that just was not dramatic enough, and they needed sort of another way to sort of tie these things together.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I thought that the reason why they had the whole subplot with Carter and the blackmail was to like introduce another just to charge it more with with drama and with the other thing is with Larry, right? Like in the beginning, they make it seem like Larry did kill these girls, and we just need you to get us to tell
Yeah.
him where the bodies are. And then, like midway through the show, you see they basically say like, actually, we don't know for sure that Larry did this, and now there's this uncertainty around whether Jimmy's mission is a lost cause because maybe Larry didn't even do it. And so they introduce like all of these little elements of drama to, I guess, to keep the reader hooked, or not the viewer hooked, and to keep you guessing. And I thought it was all like well done. I mean, it was a good show. Um,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
good.
so yeah, it was
We're
good.
picking at plot holes, but yeah, we both
Yeah,
liked it. We both thought it was good.
I thought it was excellent. I mean, yeah. So they also do like an excavation of Jimmy's upbringing, which I don't know if in the end it added anything to the overall plot, but I guess it was just interesting from like what, like a characterological perspective of like, who is this guy, what drives him, why. Well, there was that interesting scene where Lauren, the FBI agent, asks like, "What do you like about women?" And
Yeah,
Jimmy's like, "Everything."
yeah,
And then she says, "Well, what do you not like?" And he couldn't think of anything. But Lauren was pushing him, right? Because I guess she was operating under the assumption that Larry has this like resentment towards women because he's been rejected by them his whole life. And so she wants Jimmy, who like as an adult, as a super good looking athletic guy, he's never had any issues with women. And so they had to um, delve into his past and the complexities of his relationship with his mother growing up, and how she divorced the dad, and how they were always fighting, and that he had like a stepdad or the mom's boyfriend who was abusive towards them. And so he had these feelings towards his mom, and I guess like the idea was like whatever resentment he felt towards her would help him to understand who Larry is and why he has these negative feelings as well. It's
Yeah.
kind of a little bit of a leap there, but
But
I
was
guess it
it
was a way for us to help us to get to know Jimmy better.
the mom? Oh, the mom thing was very weird. Oh yeah, I don't know if this was. Yeah, yeah, I remember that now. That was very strange. Like, so he's got this stepdad who like beats up his mom, and then he finally figures out at some point, oh, she's keeping him around because one day I could beat him. It was so weird. It was like, no, I don't think that happened. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And then like he gets beat up by him. He's like, you took your shot and you missed. Like she's some kind of fight trainer. And like the whole point of her having a son, and, like the whole point is to like make her son tougher. Like her marriage is just based on that to get him to one day beat up his stepdad. It was
Well, I don't know
bizarre.
if was that what it was? I thought, okay, so he's a kid, he's like 14 or 15 or something, and he's like taking martial arts classes. And I guess like in real life this was true. Like he took taekwondo, he took all this stuff, and he saw his mom's boyfriend beating her up and wanted to defend her, and that he tried and he failed very poorly. He did, he got, what did he say? Something like he wiped the floor with me. And then later he's in his room, he's got a black eye and he's like clearly roughed up. And then, the mom is like, someday, I mean, I think what it was like, she was, I mean, I'm trying to take like a sympathetic perspective towards her, which is like she wants out of this relationship, but she's scared, and the only way she'll feel confident enough and comfortable enough to leave is if her son is able to take him out. I don't know. That's like hard to imagine, though, right? Because like,
This reminds me of the Northman. No, you are the king.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But like, because it doesn't make, well, part of it doesn't make sense, because I would imagine, at least based on the way that the Big Jim character played by Ray Liotta is portrayed, is like if he just told his dad like, hey, someone's beating up mom, like he would have handled it, right? And he was a police officer. So like something was weird about that, but okay, like that was a very odd and then the other weird thing was that after he got beat up by the mom's boyfriend, and then she comes into the room and is like, oh, someday but not today, then they have sex in the room next door and he could hear it, right? Like
Yeah,
very like something, yeah, something weird about that, where they have sex right after he beats up her son. And so I guess like, but anyway, like the whole thing I think was like to tap into his own resentment towards his mom and like use that to understand Larry. I mean, I'd be curious to know if like this was in the memoir too. Um, and I think like the whole, another reason why they showed those scenes was because like they wanted to show James, like part of what motivates him is like, why he works out, why he's hooking up with all of these random women, getting involved in crime, so preoccupied with just being like the cool guy, is to sort of like forget that that's who he was, because it actually took him a while to even describe that to Lauren. Remember, like she yells at him like every time she says like, what did you think about your parents getting divorced or fighting all the time? And he kept saying like, it's cool, it's fine, it's one of those things. And she like screams at him, she's like, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. And then finally he breaks down and tells her this. So I guess it was like trying to crack through this facade of what deconstructing the cool guy or something. And then that was whatever, like that allowed us to sort of understand him and to see like how it was that a cool guy might be able to become friends with this like very
yeah.
weird character.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so according to this, so they got divorced. Lynn's new husband and Jimmy didn't get along well, and Jimmy gave his stepfather two black eyes during a fight, according to the book. Um,
Okay.
then he went to his dad's house, and his dad's bachelor life didn't turn out to be great for father and son. So Jimmy had to return to Lynn and her husband's house. So this stuff about fighting and weird, sex stuff. it's yeah, I don't know if any of that stuff, let me see here. Uh yeah, and so she died at age 50 from COPD. Okay, yeah,
Um,
I'm interested. I sort of want to read. I sort of want to read this. I sort of want to read the memoir. Yeah, it's yeah, it was yeah, trying to get him to be angry at women so he could understand. And we didn't see him like though. It didn't seem to use it. I mean, there's nothing in like he did that was like, oh, now he's angry at women.
No, no,
Uh,
no, not at all. But I think it was more like, where at first, the first thing he says is like, she says, the FBI agent, what do you like about women? And he says everything. And then later in the series, you see this progression of him interacting with women at the bar and having sex with all of them. But there's this sort of like joylessness on his face, this kind of like, like if clearly, like, of course he enjoys the sex. But as far as like the connection with any of these women or his feelings towards any of them, like there's an emptiness there, and so I think like they were trying to use some of that to get him to connect with Larry, even though like they're polar opposites on this, right? As far as like the ability to attract women, um, yeah, and I
yeah.
think like even yeah, yeah. So anyway, I thought that that was like an interesting angle they were trying to get at, because they also delve into Larry's early life too, and his childhood and his relationship with his brother and his dad, right? Because they show Larry when he's a kid, like digging up graves to steal jewelry and valuables from the caskets, because they lived right next to a cemetery,
Well,
and
his dad
so
works at the cemetery. His dad's a gravedigger.
right. So his dad's a gravedigger. He would send Larry down to like, there's that pretty gruesome scene where he's trying to get the wedding ring off of the corpse, and his dad tosses down a pair of pliers to help him like to remove the ring from the finger, and he cuts the finger off to get it, and then he keeps the finger, right? And so yeah, that was pretty rough. It kind of reminded me actually of I mean, I don't know if I'm reaching here, but the scene in The Sopranos where Tony witnesses his dad chop off the guy's finger, and that was the first time he had a panic attack. But I don't know if that was like an homage, if that really happened, but that was the scene that jumped to mind,
It
right? There is
seems
like a little bit of an overlap, right? Because you have Ray Liotta is in this show, and Ray Liotta was in Goodfellas, and Goodfellas has the connection with
yeah.
Sopranos, so maybe
Seems a reach. I mean, they both involve fingers, and they both involve removing a finger. But yeah, okay. I guess it's
as
possible.
kids with your dad there,
Yeah, but the kid does it, and when the other one, the kid observes it. So I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah. What else was there? Yeah, and the dad is portrayed like big Jim is like just like a saint. Uh, and in the show uh what I had something on the tip of my tongue, and I forgot
He
what it
looks
was.
rough. I mean, I don't know, like, what did he die of, Ray Liotta? I mean, because we saw him in The Many Saints of Newark, and he looked okay, right? I mean, clearly he's getting old, but there was a marked difference, and maybe they did this on purpose, right, with the makeup and the hair or something. But in this series, he looked like very, bloodshot eyes and kind of
He was supposed to be a stroke victim
skin.
recovering.
And
They had
oh,
to
is
make
that
what
right?
was it?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he was on
Yeah,
medication and stuff, but then he actually died. So I wonder if
yeah. I think they just
there was some kind of illness that was overtaking him in the final stages of this. When
yeah.
they were filming the show.
Oh, okay. And here's
Uh,
the other big plot hole that I thought was like sort of stupid. Um, this apparently was close to close to sort of happening. The map thing at the end, like he memorizes the map. And what he's supposed to know the bodies because you have this big map that has like a dot in Illinois and like a dot in Indiana and like a dot in
yeah, that
Minnesota.
was
What was
dumb.
that?
That was really dumb. I wonder if that actually happened. Right, he was like gnawing off his fingertips at the end, because they threw him in solitary
They
confinement.
say he
And
did. They say there was a map. Now maybe he would. It wouldn't take you to bodies. Maybe it would give you like you could say he killed X, Y, and Z if this person within this area of Indiana got killed and he's a suspect. Maybe that's worse. But it seemed like he thought that like that map would give him the bodies. Like that's what I thought that it
well,
like.
I think he was desperate too, right? Like he was clearly panicked. He was I think he believed that his freedom relied on him giving them the bodies. And so he was just doing everything he could to like demonstrate that like even if he couldn't get them the bodies, he did everything he could to try to get them, and so that was like a way for him to do so, right? Like almost like a costly signal of his devotion to the cause, to the task of
Yeah,
doing
that
this,
makes
even if
sense.
like, yeah, he's just like trying to prove like, look, I'm not slouching, I'm not slacking, like I'm doing everything I can for you. And yeah, maybe that helped. So the relationship with the psychiatrist was interesting, right? So there was the black guy, the not Beaumont, but just the prison psychiatrist who was a confidant for Jimmy, right? Where like Jimmy could
Yeah,
actually
he was
speak
his
plainly with
contact. He
him,
was like his contact for this stuff.
his
Yeah,
contact, and he was aware of what Jimmy was doing as he was an informant. But then the guy goes on vacation, and the guy's replaced by a woman, and it was really like this is another reason why I like the show. It was a sort of lampooning the sort of progressive take on therapeutic culture here, which is that so the woman takes her relationship as Larry's psychiatrist very seriously, and when she meets with Jimmy, she says, like she immediately doesn't like him for whatever reason, and then she says like, I want to make sure that you're not having any detrimental effect on the mental health of my patients, and are you, and Jimmy is like, which patients, like what are you talking about? And uh and she clearly just doesn't like him, and she's very like, but then later, right, like she gets up in the middle of their conversation and like kind of like shuns him. But then later you see her talking with Larry, and Larry's like acting weird and creepy. And she asks him at one point, like, what would you do if you were in my position as the psychiatrist? And he like has this creepy voice, and he was like, I would say, tell me your dreams, bitch. Like he's just like acting like an insane person, and she's just like calmly like trying to understand him. So Jimmy, who's like relatively normal, she doesn't like, but then you have this crazy psychopathic serial killer. She's like, oh yeah, let me, tell me more about, well,
well,
your
he's the
brother and your
victim.
life. He's a victim, right? Jimmy's
He
a
needs
bad
our
guy.
help.
And yeah, clearly the psychopathic serial killer is the real victim here. And so then, like later in that episode, you see like Larry is describing in great detail, like great and graphic detail, how he killed this girl and like tied her to a tree and like choked her out with two belts and like, step by step describing like how he kidnapped this girl, raped her, and killed her. And Jimmy's like doing all he can to like keep a straight face and like show like make gestures of approval so that Larry will continue the story, but clearly he's like on the inside like horrified by what he's hearing. And I just found this like a twist, right? Because the psychiatrist is like, are you having a detrimental effect on my patients? And it's actually Larry who's the one who had the detrimental effect, because he's actually the crazy person here, and Jimmy's normal. And so this was like a neat little twist, right? A different kind of show would have made like, Larry out to be more of a victim, and Jimmy, this like, cool drug dealer guy to actually be, the one who you should be against or
Yeah.
suspicious of.
Yeah, you're right when you say this show is sort of a throwback. It's like law enforcement, is good. They want to find the criminals. It's like even like the villain is sort of like the liberal justice system that's like finding a technicality to like release Larry, and everyone knows he's just guilty. And then you're right with the psychiatrist thing. The psychiatrist is also like when Jimmy and Larry get into that fight. The psychiatrist is like it's like she's the one behind taking. Uh, Jimmy to solitary, which I don't think like that's what the psychiatrist does, but she's like standing there with like the prison guards, like she's the one in charge of the guards, which I thought was pretty weird.
Right, because
Um,
because early on she said, like the psychiatrist said, like, I'm not in law enforcement, right? Like this isn't
yeah,
my like, yeah, you can talk to me about anything. And yeah. So that was a little bit silly too.
it's like it's him, guys. He's the one who told me in our psychiatric session that he's the bad one, and Larry's the like. I don't think that they take they just listen to the psychiatrist for who's at fault in a fight, and then put the guy in solitary
And then like,
confinement.
why would she believe it, right? Like so presumably what happened is Larry went to her office and was like, "Oh, Jimmy was mean to me and whatever, like saying things and like scaring me and treating me badly." And so then she just like takes at face value that naturally this guy who's in here because of allegations of, murdering and raping a bunch of girls, naturally he's telling the truth. And so yeah, we should get the guards involved and throw this other guy in confinement. Like,
Yeah,
I
I
don't know.
thought it was
That just
very
seems
interesting.
very
I
unbelievable.
thought it was very interesting when the show showed before that, where they showed Larry like charging Jimmy and like pushing him against like that didn't I don't think that happened in real life, and it was sort of surprising because Jimmy has a physical advantage, I think, on Larry, so you wouldn't expect Larry
Oh,
to.
that was when they blew up, right? When Jimmy was finally like, "You're sick. You're a demented monster," and he finally just explodes and says, like, you're not going to your appeal's not going to go through because you're a monster. And then Larry says like, "Oh, Beaumont sent you, didn't he?"
Mm.
Yeah, and then he does attack. I mean, the show, right? He attacks him and pushes him, and I mean, I don't know, like Larry has a weight advantage, I think.
Yeah,
Even
I
though
guess
like
if he was angry enough,
yeah,
but
explosive.
he's supposedly like creepy and lacks confidence. He would attack a big guy like that. I don't know if like that's maybe I guess it's not
If he was
impossible.
angry enough, right? And
Uh-huh.
I guess we're also supposed to believe, at least the way that I took it was like we're seeing the dark side of him. Like this is the side of him that emerges when he is like raping these girls and killing them. And this was what his brother described, right? Like Gary is later talking to Miller and Lauren McCauley, the cops, and he's saying that like he so Gary describes this event from what do you say, like 10 or 15 years ago, where he and Larry pick up a woman hitchhiker, and first Gary has sex with her, but then he kind of like encourages Larry, what did he say? Basically to like have sex with her as his first time. And he said that like something in Larry, just like he turned into an animal. He said he reminded him of a wolf
Yeah,
and had this crazy look in his eyes and was like implying that Larry wanted to kill this woman and
yeah.
Gary had to like stay in the tent with them because I guess they were sleeping in
Well,
a tent. So
she
Gary said,
refused. She refused Larry. It's like
"Oh, she
Gary's like,
refused."
well, that was a funny scene because like he's like Gary's like, when a woman say no, but sometimes she really means yes. Like,
Oh
no, this
yeah,
time
I
she meant
forgot
it. Like,
yeah, and that scene was played straight, right? It wasn't played as like, oh, look at this
this is a
backwards
sexist.
hillbilly
Yeah,
hick
yeah,
saying this.
exactly. I
No, they
thought it was
played it
like,
straight.
yeah.
Yeah, like you're supposed to, as the audience, like understand, like, oh yeah, you're right. Some women say no when they mean yes, and that's just
Yeah.
and like just go along with it. Rather, like, because you don't like what they could have done to like insert some politically correct commentary or something was have Lauren roll her eyes or make some snide
Yeah,
remark.
that didn't
But they
happen.
didn't do that, right? And so then, yeah, like Larry rapes this woman. Gary is just standing by,
No,
and then like stays.
I don't think Larry does he successfully rape her? I think he just
I
starts
think he.
hitting her, and then like Gary stops him. I think.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So
Yeah, I think
whatever.
it
He
was ambiguous.
attacks.
It was like he really went at her. I think it was like ambiguous. Like he just beat her up or he raped her. I don't know.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he assaulted her either way. And then Gary is like, he had this look like he wanted to, he had this dark look, basically, I think implying he wanted to murder her. And Gary stayed in the tent to make sure he wouldn't do that. So clearly, like Larry, in the right conditions, maybe when he's feeling extremely emotional or aroused in some way, like he becomes impulsive and violent and stupid, which that makes
Yeah,
sense to
well, I
me
mean
as
that
like
was
as a
towards women
criminal.
though. So
So
like it's different from when people can't fight back. That's the sort of a thing. The thing
yeah,
I liked about the Larry character, the scenes were there were some really creepy ones. The one where whenever Jimmy would talk about girls, like the looks that and noises Larry would make were just so good. He's like, how many girls you been with, Jimmy? It's like 80. He's like, 80. Like he does this thing where he's like sort of like living vicariously through Jimmy and like just really getting excited or like closing his eyes or like rolling his eyes back and like sort of moaning. He does this and like Jimmy doesn't know what to do with it. I just thought those scenes were, I mean, they were, they were very sort of, they were emotional. They were like, what's going on here? It was really, yeah, I don't know. I think it had a good effect on at least made the viewer, sort of captivated by what was going on.
yeah, I agree. Though, I mean, like he was licking his lips and like, yeah, just every like, yeah, I thought he did a great job with that role. One thing that was interesting is that, so why do you think that they decided to make Gary into a really good looking guy? Like, is that in order to like basically, I guess like one possibility is that like it makes it more plausible that Larry would befriend Jimmy, right? Because the idea is like,
Yeah.
oh, just act like his brother, and he's like, oh, another like, good looking, strapping young, good looking dude, and he's like, oh, just act like the brother. And at one point, Larry does say this. He says something along the lines of like, you remind me of Gary so much, um, which I guess was the point there. But yeah, that was interesting. I mean, because generally the show seems to take this like, this position of like the good guys are good looking and the bad guys are bad looking,
Yeah,
right? Like Jimmy and the
exactly. Yeah.
cops are all attractive, and then you have Larry who's like very unattractive, but his brother's good looking. So but I guess that was like a way to help us understand like why he would want to
Yeah.
become friends with
And
Jimmy.
Carter's not very good
Um,
looking. Carter's like this ginger, like this fat ginger.
yeah, with like big red
Troll.
cheeks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't realistic. I would just go back to that storyline because, like, he could just Jimmy could just go tell the FBI, and like, they would like, the FBI is like, they could pull rank on a corrections officer. They could start investigating this corrections officer. He's interfering with the federal investigation, like, and then he's gonna have Jimmy killed. Like, that's not good for Carter. I mean, so it really all this, like, Jimmy when Jimmy tells Lauren, she's just like, oh no, this correction, like they can't do anything about it. And I thought that was that was a
yeah.
sort of another plot hole. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is just they made everyone better look. I mean, the narrative that, like, I guess the narrative comes from Gary, the real Gary himself, is like Gary is like so much better looking and well adjusted than Larry, and in real life he's just like not really. And
Just
so, like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it
and so
wasn't
yeah, they had
bad,
this
but
story. Yeah, they had this story that, Larry had a big brother. You look at Larry at his Civil War reenactment thing. There's a picture. I mean, he's not even that fat. I mean, he's not that fat for an American. Um, and Gary,
especially
it's
for
like
that part of America, right? Like, wait, where are they? Where
they're in
where
like
was
they're in
Gary
Illinois. They're like
or
in,
Larry?
well, he's
Is that
traveling
Illinois?
around like Illinois and Indiana, basically. And then
Okay, okay,
they're in
right.
Missouri in prison.
Yeah, like the
Um,
Midwest and the South, like you get some huge people, right? So yeah, he's
yeah,
like a
this was
he's like
30
average.
years. 30 years ago was not as bad as today.
That's true.
But
Yeah,
the uh yeah, and so I mean they just and so they had to, like, they wanted to tell the story. It makes the story better if Gary is good looking and talent. Gary's like not successful. They don't make him successful. I think he's still a hick who just like lives in
yeah,
the he just happens to have a little bit of athletic ability and like is good looking.
yep,
Um and he comes by, they come by and he's like, "Oh, we have manners around here. I'm going to get you a drink." Like, they're supposed to be like
yeah,
salt of the earth, like regular folk.
yeah.
Yeah, you're
But
right.
then
I think
eventually
that
he does sell out. I mean, he does. Well, I don't know if selling out is the right word, but he does sort of come around. At first,
yeah.
he's sort of protecting, and he refuses to acknowledge that Larry is actually a serial killer. And then eventually, he kind of comes around and is like, "Look, yeah, it's right. Like we know. Like he basically acknowledges that his brother is crazy." And so then there was an interesting scene near the end where like he is one. Okay, so here's another kind of plot hole where Larry is mailing all of this stuff back to his brother and to his
Yeah.
dad, right? Like he sends them the birds, he sends them that map. Um, but then later, Gary visits him in the prison, and Gary basically says that, like, you need to stay here. Like, it's good that your appeal didn't go through. You need to stay here. And Larry starts crying, and he says, like, "Oh, not you, Gary, not you." And that was a weird scene because is he saying like, "Not you," as in, "I don't want you to see me as guilty," or is he saying like, "Not you," as in like, I like, I thought you had my back. Like, yes, you know that I'm a bad guy, but that I thought that you were on my side as far as like wanting to get me out of prison. Like, what does he think?
Well,
Like,
I don't think
what
they
does
ever.
Larry believe about Gary?
Yeah, I don't think they ever explicitly talk about it. I think if you're in Larry's mind, I think it's like along, his thinking is like, okay, like if I killed those girls, like it wasn't, he's like this. I think of the show Larry. He's like, she's hitting me. What could I do? It's like the girls are like mean to him. I really do think like in the show he's like that. Like the girls are mean to him. He's just talking to them, and then they assault him, and he just basically has to defend himself, and they're just so unfair to him. And I think that he thinks like Gary thinks
Yeah.
that like he didn't kill them, but if he did, he was justified in some way. And
Yeah,
I
he's
think
not guilty of any any sort of moral transgression, that he was in the right. Like he doesn't yeah, so he's suddenly like disappointed that Gary believes that he belongs in prison, whereas
Yeah, that's the
before
point.
he
He
didn't believe that.
belongs
Yeah.
in. It's not the truth or falsity of whether he actually did, because then his in Larry's morality, it's not that bad to have killed those for him to have killed those girls.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, it's the fact that Larry judges or Gary judges
Yeah.
him and
Yeah.
doesn't like him, just thinks he
That
doesn't
makes sense.
belong
Okay,
with the
that
girl.
helps to clarify what was going on there, because it's like, why would you send your brother like all of this all of this like evidence or information, like
Yeah,
you
why
know
was he sending it? Why was
clearly
he sending them that stuff? Yeah, that was weird. That was weird. I guess
clearly
they knew, and they're burning. They don't
they're
want like
burning
him
it.
to like send them his confession. It's like they think he's gonna get in trouble, so they're just burning it. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
you're right.
exactly.
Do you think there's a
Yeah, so
class
they've
difference here? And like, so I think there's a lot of upper class people would turn in their family members in a case like this, and I think a lot of lower class people wouldn't. What do you think?
I'm inclined to agree that lower class people would not, right? They have more loyalty. Upper class people,
I mean, more likely. I don't know if
I
they
think
all.
more likely
Yeah,
sounds right. That's yeah, because like, I mean, if you look at like if you read Henrik's book on the weirdest people in the world, and like just generally speaking, like around the world, people rate loyalty to be especially valued as a trait, right? Family loyalty, whether you're willing to sell out your friend or your family. But weird people, right? Like Americans and Europeans, wealthy Westerners are more likely to adhere to like the sort of impartial legal system. And so, if you're in a Western country and you're also wealthy, that would make sense to me that you'd be sort of less loyal to your family, like prioritize this impartial, objective sense of justice over loyalty to family or
yeah. The
friends. So.
Unabomber's brother. What was he? What was his job?
I don't know, but my guess is he was a probably middle class guy, right? Because Kaczynski went to Harvard and he was like a very smart, well to do guy. So his brother is probably like at least middle class.
Yeah, that's a good. It's David
Yeah,
Kaczynski. He graduated Columbia,
yeah.
1970. He wrote 10
So yeah,
articles for the Columbia Daily Spectre.
yeah.
So
So he's a
yes, I
smart
think that.
guy.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think you do. Now, if you want to be unsympathetic to the lower classes, you could just say, the upper classes are more moral. I mean, they're they care about the common good more than other people do who are loyal. But whatever. It's just that's just a judgment. But I think that's right, and I think that's part of it. I think there's sort of this this hick culture interacting with these maybe upper middle class federal agent and this other guy who sort of don't get they don't get Larry, Gary, or the family protecting Larry, or think that they shouldn't be.
yeah, yeah. And if it had been one of their relatives, yeah, that makes sense. Like it's yeah, having more trust in the institution rather than in your family. Um, More confidence in it somehow. That makes sense to me. Yeah, like that whole like the whole like no snitch culture, right? Like, dude,
Yeah,
if like people at elite universities are like total snitches, right? Like like any kind of advantage they can get. Whereas like the whole like snitches get stitches thing does not. That's very much a sort of a like a working class, lower class culture. Um, yeah. Yeah, so the fact that he wouldn't like, yeah, that just intuitively, no one even questioned it. Like, of course he wouldn't sell out his brother. As a viewer, you sort of intuitively understand this. Whereas if this had been a case of like, two like, I don't know, upper middle class lawyers or some other kind of like educated occupational positions, and the brother is a serial killer, I think you'd be angry.
you don't.
You would be like, why don't you tell them it's your brother, right? Like you would
Yeah.
judge them more harshly for it.
Yeah, you don't watch Saul, but you did watch Breaking Bad. So
Yeah.
Skyler, spoiler alert for those who have not watched Breaking Bad, who have watched Blackbird, and who are still with us.
That population, that's like 11 people. They
But
watch
I know
Blackbird, but not Breaking Bad.
That, that's that many
Yeah.
people. But yeah, skip ahead a minute or so. So Skylar, when she finds out about Walt, like Walt sort of wants her to maybe think it's okay. My recollection, I watched this a very long time ago. But Skylar is just no, zero tolerance. She's going to the cops. He's involved with drugs. He's illegal. She just wants nothing
Yeah.
to do with it and nothing to do with him. And so that's a sort of she's a sort of has the upper middle class reaction
Yeah.
to law breaking, which I think, which if I recall, Walter was shocked, but he didn't think it would be that. He didn't think it would be that extreme.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, we never really get into their family backgrounds, right? Like, what did Walt's parents do for a living? What did Skylar's parents do for a living? Um, yeah, but then like if you compare that to Carmela, right? Where like Carmela, I think she came like I think Tony like mentions once or twice that she came from like like a good family. You see her parents and like they're
No, I thought
you know
they were at least mob adjacent. I mean,
They were mob
Chris was
adjacent.
also, yeah.
Yeah, Moltisanti was her cousin, but, like, as far as her immediate family, her remember, like, her mother and father were, like, these sort of, like, the Wonder Bread wops or whatever, were, like, they tried to be respectable, at least they aspired towards respectability, and that was part of the reason why Tony liked her, and yet even Carmela, despite, coming from, like, a semi-respectable family, even she is, like, willing to look the other way because she still has ties to the criminal underworld, and I think, like, even if she knew like every single detail of
No, no,
everything Tony had ever done.
Carmela knows he's a mob. What are you talking?
Well,
Carmela
no, 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 she knows she's
enjoys this.
mobbed up, right? But like, I'm sure like if she asked for specific, like Tony would he glossed over it, right? Like he wouldn't tell her that like, no, I like literally choked Christopher Moltisanti out in the SUV. Like he
No, he
wouldn't tell her
wouldn't
the
say that.
details.
Obviously, he wouldn't say
But
that.
what I'm saying is like, even if he did, Carmela would not betray him. Right, like even if he told her, "Yes, I choked out your nephew," I think Carmela is like because
Well,
of her
no,
ties with the criminal, she
it's a
wouldn't.
completely different culture. It's a
Yeah,
completely different culture. I mean, she
yeah,
married the mob boss, and like
right.
she doesn't go to the. I mean, that's just not part of her. Part of her
Yeah,
reality.
exactly. Because yeah,
Um,
but if she had been like a typical house, like any other housewife in the Soprano neighborhood, right? Like Jeannie Cusimano would have turned her husband in for murder, right? Like anyone else in that neighborhood would have.
Jeannie, no, the fat one with
No, no, no. The next door neighbor.
Jeannie Casamano. Who's
She's
Jeannie?
their family physician's wife, the next door neighbor.
Family
She's the
physician.
one who Carmela in season one like bullies into writing a Georgetown letter of recommendation for Meadow. These are the guys that Tony goes
That.
golfing with, and like, these are
Oh,
like
yeah. Well,
the
yeah,
sort
they're
of the other
different.
guys
Yeah,
in the
exactly,
neighborhood. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
despite the fact that they all live in the same neighborhood and they all have like roughly the same financial resources,
yeah,
Tony and Carmela just come from another world where you wouldn't rat out your family, right? That's like very
yeah.
much like sort of like lower class criminal subculture. Just yeah, that is interesting, right? Because I never even questioned it. I think most people have that same reaction where Gary won't sell out his brother, and that just makes sense. Whereas if they had come from a different social class, you would have you'd be like, why? I get that he's your brother, but he's still a killer, So you have a
Yeah.
different reaction.
Yeah, and they have to appeal to his like pragmatic sense. Like, Gary, are you going to be able to like watch him all the time? It's like, yeah, it's like sort of like the poor
Yeah,
people don't think these things. They don't think these things through. They just keep enabling their family members. Like he's going to get him out of jail, and like Gary's like, oh wait a minute, it's gonna be more trouble again. He's just gonna start killing women again. Which, who knows
interesting.
if he
So
would have
appealing to
started
like the
killing?
self interest. Oh, he would have 100%. Larry
Yeah,
would have like taken his
yeah.
van and
Maybe he would have
he
counted his blessings and been like, well, I mean, they tell
uh
themselves that because they need to keep him in jail. They want the justice of it, but I don't know if he. I think he would have. I think might have had self preservation now that he knows that he can get. I
You
don't
think
know. It's
Larry
all
would have?
very.
I don't know.
It's all
Maybe.
very weird.
You're right. I
It's all
agree.
very
We
weird.
should we should set him free, Richard. I agree with you. Let him go. Free Larry Hall.
Well, a part of me, I didn't look at the evidence, but a part of me thinks, maybe he was innocent. Maybe Jimmy is just good looking and wanted to get out of jail. Like, I don't know. Like,
He
maybe,
sold them a lie. No, come on.
he took his lies.
Coaxed a fake confession. Like use the power of
Yeah.
charisma to like
No,
get this poor
I mean,
guy.
I think it's, we do know from the documentary at least. I mean, there's not a lot. I mean, there's not a lot besides, Jimmy's word. And
Circumstantial kind of. I mean, he confessed multiple times, so it's maybe Larry is just like completely. He's got a screw loose, right? Because he confessed and recanted. I don't know, 2 or 3 times, which is like, who does that?
yeah,
And I
it
guess
does
you're right.
that.
There's no like hard evidence. Yeah, I mean, I guess
Like
without a body or
he'll be in
DNA
the area.
evidence.
Yeah, like he'll be in
Yeah,
the area, but where like girls will disappear. This happened like more than once. But the other stuff is just him, saying something like, if he's it's like okay, it makes it's sort of there's something that I don't know doesn't like add up a little bit. Okay, so either he's smart, or you imagine he's smart, or he's dumb. So if he's smart, he gets away with all these murders, but he's like confessing and going back on it. Or if he's dumb, I don't, maybe then he's suggestible, but then I don't see how he kills dozens of people and doesn't leave behind any evidence. So it seems not to add up like either way. It is. So I mean, I would like to like sort of read more. Like maybe he is just like smart and he's self-destructive and like likes the thrill of like confessing and then recanting and all that. That's one explanation. But yeah, I don't know. It's still just something about it all doesn't add up.
How long is his sentence?
I don't know. He's a life sentence. Oh, it's a life sentence, I think.
It's a life sentence, and they don't have any hard evidence. That's kind of
Well, it was a
interesting.
kidnap. They got him for let's see, what did they actually get him for?
I
Uh,
mean, yeah, it's just crazy that they got him for that. When I mean, I'm pretty much sold that he did it, but there's no like a life sentence for something with no hard, foolproof evidence, no witnesses, no DNA, no fingerprints, no surveillance, just like multiple. I mean, I guess like in the show, they did something where they found the clothes, right? Like they found these clothes. Folded up in a certain way, and then Larry
yeah.
describes how he folded the clothes to Jimmy, and Jimmy tells the FBI agents exactly how the clothes were folded, and only the person who folded the clothes could have known that, and therefore they infer that, oh, this must have been Larry, and that was enough. At least like that was the plot line in the show, which maybe not happened in real life,
Yeah, and like,
but
and
even
who
that
knows?
was kind of like, you know.
And who knows? Because they probably talked about a lot of stuff, and so he could have given him like 100 details, and like one of them happened to be true, right? And then the FBI is like, "Oh, that's the thing that was true. They folded his clothes." It's
P
like,
hacking, P hacking for
yeah,
the
be
legal
hacking
justice
for a
system.
murder confession. Yeah,
There you
because
go.
it's not that like he could have he folded her clothes. He could have told him. He always says stuff that's not true too, right? Like all the stuff he says that's not true, and sometimes he says things that are true. And when if he says things that are true, like only the killer would have done, they put him
Yeah.
in jail.
Only the killer would have talked about putting folding a T-shirt and putting it on top of a pair of jeans. Case closed.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, that's possible. Yeah, because he talked a lot of shit. He told a lot of random stories. You don't know what's real. Um, Yeah, I don't know. That's it. Yeah, I guess it's complicated, right? Like the show made it seem like open and shut. But they had to, right? Because they had a show. They had like a beginning and end. They had to, they had a tight 6 episodes. Good show. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I recommend it. But like, yeah, there were some glaring, especially if you compare the series to real life and other things. There's some complexities there. But I don't know. I think any show nowadays that's like produced in the current year that doesn't hit you over the head with any kind of like political correctness or any of like certain ideology or anything is just like, like this exact same show could have been made in like 1999, no details changed whatsoever, and it would have been like you wouldn't know the difference, right? Like that is nice that there's no sort of current year politics like injected into it.
yeah. Well, I mean, besides the fact that they made up, I mean, they took a guy who was white and made him who was black. I mean, they
I
just
think they
for
they
no
would have done
reason.
that in '99 too. They would have
Oh, no,
introduced, they would have changed some. Yeah, I think that's, it's possible they would have done that.
yeah, I mean the hot. Yeah, you see hot women,
Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
There would have
put a
been no
hot
female
woman.
characters if not for that FBI agent, right? There would have been
That's true.
there would have been none. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of yeah. It says life in prison. I think it's one of those. It's like Al Capone, where they give him like the maximum sentence possible because they think he killed all those. Yeah, he's probably guilty. I mean, he was. I think the fact that he was pulled over in all these situations, you know, so
Just a
maybe
coincidence.
yeah. Yeah, maybe
Is
the truth is somewhere in between. He had a few of the. He killed one or two, and then like he confesses to like 40. I don't know if there's any evidence he's really like it's harder to say whether he's actually a serial killer who killed dozens of people. Like we're supposed to think might have happened. But whatever. He's in jail for the.
I agree. We should let him free. He's a good
Should let
guy.
him
He's a
free.
good
Free
dude.
there,
We
free
need
there you go.
to,
Did you ever watch Making a Murderer? Apparently, that was completely BS. Like the guy was
never
clearly
saw.
guilty, and they made this Netflix documentary that like 10 years ago was like the biggest thing on Netflix, and they just like left out like all this stuff. And yeah, these people wanted to free this guy.
I know what you're talking about. I never got into that, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I think like Netflix just produces so much content, and I'm just like generally skeptical. I don't know. I've never really. I guess Ozark was okay, but I don't know. I've not been impressed with Netflix. Apple
What am I?
TV so far, everything I've seen has been pretty good.
Yeah,
So
that's true. They have like Netflix has like a million shows and like none of them are good. And then I've been watching Apple TV and I've just been turning on like just the stuff they promote. They only promote a few things like Ted Lasso. Have you seen Ted Lasso?
I haven't seen it, but I hear good things.
it's polarizing among people I talk to, but I really I like it. Um, Ted Lasso, Blackbird. What else have I been watching
I
on
know you
Apple
don't like
TV?
Severance, but I like Severance. I thought it was well executed, good show. Um, what else have I seen on Apple TV? Yeah, there's been Pachinko was pretty good.
Mm,
Um, I haven't seen the whole series, but the episodes I've seen have been pretty good. I think there's one other. Yeah,
yeah.
just yeah. I mean, like I don't know how
It's
many
funny if
shows
you
they've actually
Google. I just
produced.
googled Apple TV, and the four things that pop up in like the Google card is like Severance, Blackbird, Ted Lasso, Pachinko. So they have a
Yeah, yeah.
very small. They try to go for a high quality,
Yeah. So it's almost
small
like
lineup.
sort of reminds me of HBO, right? Where they have like a relatively small pool of shows at any given moment, but they're
Oh, they
usually
have another
well
one
done.
called Tehran, which I watched like one or two. These are sometimes they're just taking foreign shows. This is an Israeli show. I
Ah,
watched a
right.
few episodes. It's okay. It didn't grab me. Um,
Okay.
for All
Yeah.
Mankind, maybe we should try these. There's one called Surface. So yeah, there's only like 8. Like there's only like 10 that they keep promoting again and again. Um, and
And
I don't know
that's
if Ted
fine.
Lasso is. Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
the Shrink Next Door. What is this? Is this any good? Inspired by the true story of Marty and the therapist who turned his life around, they took it over. When he first met Dr. Ike, Mike just wants to get better at boundaries. 30 years later, he learned to talk about them. I don't know.
I also
Seems
think that the strategy that they're doing on Apple is like they're actually only releasing one episode a week,
yeah, they
right? So
did
they
that.
don't have the binge strategy where like Netflix will like dump 13 or 20 or whatever episodes at once and you watch it, some people watch it over a weekend and it's sort of a flash in the pan and I think this is another reason why like Netflix their shows are not like that well respected or considered very prestigious is because like they first they have too much content and second like I think the binge strategy just doesn't like it doesn't have cultural staying power, right? Like the only real
Oh,
Netflix show I think that had it was House of Cards, but that was like if you compare that to like the number of shows they've produced, to have only one or two shows that have like any cultural relevance is kind of crazy. Um,
uh,
so
let's let me see what there was a what I recently saw on Netflix, and this one they're not dumping at all. There's still episodes to come out. There was one on the fundamentalist Mormons. There's a documentary. Keep, sweep,
okay,
pray, and obey. It's mesmerizing. There's 4 episodes so far. I think there's supposed to be more, but you start watching that. I think I've mentioned it to you, and then
I
maybe
think you
maybe we
did.
can maybe we could talk about it. It's very. I mean, it's amazing. It's an amazing anthropological study. Um, the Comey Rule. What is that? Lilyhammer. I watched that. That wasn't really that good. Uh, yeah, you're right.
Lilyhammer.
There aren't a lot of great.
No.
Narcos is from Netflix, right?
Yeah, but even that seemed like a flash in the pan where like I remember a little while people talked about it, but then it just kind of slowly went away. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there's not much from Netflix. Like, there's a few shows, but they've produced like I don't know. I mean, how many shows have Netflix? Over the last 10 years now. So it was 10 years ago, I think, roughly, that House of Cards launched, and they got into
Well,
this business of original
Peaky
content.
Blinders. People watch Peaky Blinders. Babylon
Okay.
Berlin. I mean, that's a foreign show. Ozarks. You mentioned Ozarks. That's
Oh
Netflix,
yeah,
right?
Ozark was pretty good. Yeah, that was pretty good. I mean, yeah, I
But
don't know if I'm being
they've had a
unfair or
few hits.
not. They've had a few. So,
Jupiter's Legacy.
yeah.
What's that? That seems to be a big thing on Netflix. Superhero television series. Anyways, okay. I think we're just talking about
Yeah,
random
we're
TV
just
shows.
riffing now. We don't have yeah, so anyway, like yeah, I thought it was a good show. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing like what else Apple TV does.
Mhm.
It's so far been
Yeah,
impressed.
and let's
It's been good.
yeah, let's. I guess if we're searching around for stuff to do from now on, I think probably Apple TV is where we should start since the
Oh,
average
by the way,
quality is
have you subscribed to anything from the Daily Wire? So like
like
there seem to be like getting more and more into original content. I don't think I'll subscribe until they produce a good TV show, which I don't think they have.
wait
Uh,
they're doing like a Netflix thing, the Daily Wire,
th- they have a bunch of movies. I don't know about a bunch, but they
the
have a few,
the
right?
gender thing, right?
But they also have like horror
What is a
movies.
woman?
They've produced like I don't know. I want to say like 4 or 5 movies. I haven't watched any of them,
Nice.
but yeah, at some point I'd be curious to look like if they like start producing more interesting content, and
Huh.
I'd be curious to hear from other people because I actually haven't met anyone who subscribes to them. But I looked at the Rotten Tomato scores for some of their movies, and they're actually pretty good. So
Well,
at some
they're
point,
the audience is people. So is it like a
yeah, it's a selected
streaming service?
audience.
Is it a streaming
It's a
service
streaming
or like?
service. Yeah, it's basically like Apple TV, I think, or Netflix, or just like one of these like exclusive platforms where you pay a monthly fee and you have access to whatever they're producing, right? Like
Does
Matt
it come
Walsh
with?
has
Does
his
it come with?
documentary on there.
It comes with like
Um,
Ben Shapiro like shows and stuff like that. Like you get their stuff like that.
I don't know. I wouldn't get it for that. I would just get it for the for the TV shows and movies. But I mean, yeah. So yeah. At some point, I'd be curious to hear like if anyone else has experience with Daily Wire. Do they like their experience with it? Do they like the shows? Any recommendations from there? Because they're like it'd be interesting. I think to because apparently they're not actually trying to push any kind of like political bent. It's not trying to be conservative. They're just trying to
Oh,
create
oh,
interesting
okay.
stuff.
So
So
you do get all the political. You get a Jordan Peterson show. You get PragerU. You get Michael
Daily.
Knowles, Shapiro, Candace Owens. So you get that, but then you also get uh,
Yeah. They have
you
like
get movies.
movies, right? Where is entertainment? So they have Shut
Yeah,
In, The Hyperion's superhero
yeah,
comedy.
kid stuff that will hopefully be free of
Oh,
gender.
they do have oh, these are documentaries, I see. The Enemy Within. Oh, Fauci Unmasked. You might like that one, Richard.
Well,
Unmasked.
it
Uh,
seems like the main draw is the main draw does seem to be the politics because that's up in front. It's not like
yeah.
created equal. There's
Well,
one on Clarence Thomas. So even the movies are like right wing stuff. So there's one in Clarence Thomas in his own words. I might watch. I might be interested in watching Clarence Thomas, documentary. Found
Shut In.
and you got Andrew Carolla, China, the enemy within. Who's this by? Look at this. Look at this one. China, the enemy within. Episode 1, Fauci. Episode 2, Biden.
Oh, I love that. That'd be hilarious.
It's like about China, and
No.
then like every episode is like a Democrat. It's like 3, education. 4, the NBA. 5, Hollywood. The enemy
What am I looking at? Watch. Okay, I see. Oh yeah, Michael Knowles, all this stuff. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm mostly curious about the movies though, in particular, but not
Some of them don't
curious
look.
enough yet.
Yeah,
Oh
some of
yeah,
them do
okay, I
not
see the
look.
documentary.
Yeah, some of them do not look political. Some of them just look like real movies.
The
I don't know if they're
Greatest
any good.
Lie. George Floyd and the Rise of BLM. Yeah, okay.
This I'm interested in this. I mean, if you could, like, I'm not a big Ben Shapiro fan, but I would like a conservative sort of version of Netflix. If they did something like this, that could be interesting. I think people underestimate, what's possible.
Yeah, I think this movie Shut In looks interesting. A young mother barricaded inside a pantry. Oh, I don't know. Well, maybe not.
To protect your
Okay.
useful.
I think I'm still waiting. I'll hold
Yeah,
off
yeah.
for
They've only got
now.
like 4 movies besides a political, so
Yeah.
apparently, right? They don't have.
The Enemy Within.
Is this all? Yeah,
This
is this
looks so
all
this
exhaustive?
looks great.
Yeah. So when did this start? How long has this been going on?
I think like at least a year. I think I heard about it a year ago. Um yeah, but nothing has really like caught my attention to the point where I'd be.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'm like, why not? Like, I'm already giving whatever Apple and whatever other streaming
Yeah,
platforms my
13 a
money.
month,
So
8 a month.
wait, wait,
You joined with code woman.
wait. How much is it?
It's $12. It's either 12 or $20 a month. But if you join with code woman, you get it down. Yeah,
Oh,
18.
all
You
right.
get to 13 or 8.
Code
The
Woman.
So that all access gets you live streams. You get to join live chats with Ben Shapiro. So I think I think the extra one is just you get live chats with Ben Shapiro, and the basic one is $8 a month with promo code woman. Um,
All right.
the
$8 a month.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's not bad, I guess. I mean, well, the thing is, like, they have such an absence of content at the moment of like, the kind of stuff that I'd want to watch. That yeah, I don't think it's worth it just
no, it's
yet.
not. Like
I'm hoping that
four
they'll produce a
movies,
quality TV show. That's what they have all these movies and stuff, but if they make like a show, right, like just a TV series,
but it would have to start at a low
long
prestige
form.
audience, Ben Shapiro fans, and then spread to the wider culture. Like that seems to be
Is it
hard.
low
I think.
prestige? Oh wait. Well, you're talking. Are we referencing the ranking of what your audience gave him? Low
No,
prestige audience.
I think in general, like I think that
I don't know. I think
I
they're.
think
I
that
mean, well, if you compare it to like Fox News viewers, I think he probably has like a slightly higher, like highbrow, because right, like they talk about like I don't know. I've watched like some stuff by Michael Knowles. They'll talk about like literature and other kinds of stuff
no,
too,
but
right? It's not just
it's not gonna
politics of
break.
the day.
like if the New York Times is talking about something like, or the Atlantic, like it can reach conservatives. I mean, I think if something starts out on the Ben Shapiro channel, you could be a conservative professor at Harvard, um, and like conservatives will want to associate with you, and they'll give the prestige to Harvard. But like if you're like at Hillsdale, and like conservatives are all into this guy at Hillsdale, like liberals are not going to start being into that. You see what I'm saying? So
Oh
this
man.
is like Hillsdale, right? This is like a thing that gets really people who go to
Well,
Hillsdale
you know
excited.
how that happens, Richard, is if the Daily Wire produces a an interesting TV show and you and I start talking about it, then
Yes,
that'll
no, I
capture
will.
the
I will.
attention of the prestige, like center left liberals.
I
You know,
think
that's how that happens.
we are the bridge, the Ben Shapiro.
We're the bridge.
If you're like,
We're the yeah,
we
exactly.
are
We're
your,
bridging the divides. That's what we do. You know, we
we're
bridge
your
the political
pastors.
divides. Um,
Yeah.
all right,
Okay. Well,
Richard. I think
that's well.
it's time to wrap it
Yeah.
up.
So if so, okay. So yeah, we will keep an eye on the Daily Wire. We'll see if we'll see if it goes anywhere. And yeah, until next time.